Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So, we're going to talk today about one of my absolute favorite subjects, and that's finding your niche or being different for your brand, corporate or personal, and how that can propel growth and dominance as a category leader, and not how to chase your competition as a follower. Are you one of those companies spending way too much money on non branded search queries, or are you creating out a directionally navigational difference, if you will, that everyone recognizes with the courage to stand out? Do you look at category as a growth strategy? Christopher Lochhead is a former 3-time public company CMO, a podcaster with 2 of the top business podcasts on Apple, the best-selling author of Niche Down, How to Become Legendary by Being Different, and he's been referred to as the Godfather of Category Design. And on this episode, we'll discuss legendary products, companies, and categories, the role of the CMO, niching down, hiring diversified thinkers, Zig Ziglar cassette tapes, Godfather movies, Santa Cruz, and a lot more. And know as well that I tried to keep the show PG-13 for several reasons. I go blue way too often, but I went ahead and beeped out some of it, so you'll hear some beeps. So let's tune in to a category CMO leader with a categorical leader and niche shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date, please.
Hey, Shark, it's great to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, my story, I don't think is that different than many sort of people with an entrepreneurial background. When I was 18, I got thrown out of school and with very few options, sort of either manual labor or start a company. I decided to start a company. And so, like a lot of entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship for me was a way to bet on myself when sort of nobody else was going to. And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, many of us don't have too many options. And so for me, as for many, entrepreneurship was not just a way up in the world per se, but really a way out, a way out of a life of struggle and limited opportunity. And so I started my first company at 18, and that company did well for a little bit, and then it failed horribly. And by 21, I was on the edge of personal bankruptcy and had to figure out how to clean up the mess, and joined another startup and kind of got myself back on my feet again. And then a few years later, did another startup. And then ultimately in my mid to later 20s, sold the second startup I created to a Silicon Valley based software company and moved from Toronto, Canada to Silicon Valley. And at 27, 28 years old, I was the head of marketing for a publicly traded software company in the CRM space back in the old days. And I did 3 tours of duty as a CMO of public companies. And my last company, Mercury, we sold to Hewlett Packard for $5 billion. And after that, I sort of hung up my gloves. And then I spent off and on the better part of a decade advising and consulting. And then a few years ago, when my first book came out, I decided to hang that up. And today I'm primarily an author and a podcaster.
How did you sell yourself in to become a CMO in the first place? Not, being in Silicon Valley where a lot of people still look at degrees. I know that's changing a lot, but back when you started, that still must have been a concern. How did you help sell your experience?
Yeah, I think at 28 years old, when I was a first-time CMO, I'm positive I was the only 16B officer in
Yeah.
the company with no high school education. um, and here's the crazy thing. So I think because was an entrepreneur, one of my favorite expressions, Shark, is position yourself or be positioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the very beginning, I positioned myself as somebody to be, a very serious person, a very committed person. I trained myself. I educated myself in, what Zig Ziglar calls the automobile university back in the
Oh,
day
yeah.
when we still had tapes.
Yeah.
I read like a madman, even though I'm dyslexic. I knew the only ways I could learn were by doing, by reading and consuming information, and by seeking out coaches and mentors and friends. And so I tried to do all of those things and come up a very steep learning curve very quickly. Being an entrepreneur will do that, of course. And the other thing, this might sound sort of funny, But at about 17, I made a decision that I was going to do something with my life. In the early part of my life, a big question was, is Christopher going to make it? And I decided to be the man that my grandfather and my parents told me I could be. And, to put it as clearly as I know how to put it, stop around and
Mm-hmm.
go for it. And even though I'm dyslexic and have a number of other learning differences, and so traditional education wasn't for me, um, I knew I was smart and I knew I could do something. And I just had to get busy. And I did. And so by the time I was 27, going on 28, when I sold my second company and moved to Silicon Valley, um, at that point, I had positioned myself as a leader in CRM. I was consulting for British Airways, for Charles Schwab, for Johnson and Johnson, and many other early adopter Fortune 500 companies who wanted to get into CRM. And so, the reality was, I had worked very hard for the better part of a decade to become an expert in an emerging category. And as a result, I was positioned as such, and I had created a set of opportunities for myself that were pretty special.
And I speak to a lot of students. I'm sure you do mentor a lot of students today as well. But there's nothing like being out of work when you're young that will help you focus on your brand and figure out what it is that you have a niche to create. And that's the fact that you knew what your parents and grandparents wanted you to do to stop and go do something with your life is really worth a lot, because I think that's honestly being missed so much today. And
Well,
I'm
and you
starting
know
to
what?
really sound old because I just looked when you said that, and I have two sets of Zig Ziglar tapes. And the liver spots are bursting as you talk about it, that I haven't moved over, but I found them in cleaning up the man cave that I work out of here. But I could feel you as you were saying that.
And by the way, I assume they still sell those tapes in one form or another. But I will tell you this: um, my buddy Kevin Miller hosts the Ziegler podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the folks at Ziegler and Kevin have done a
Oh, they're
remarkable
brilliant.
job,
Yeah.
right?
How do you
And
carry
so,
on a legacy? I mean, you talk about setting the bar that high and then he passes away. I mean, to be able to continue that story the way he has is just amazing.
well, and the beauty of it, of course, is we have all those tapes,
Yeah,
and they can be modernized, and the audio can be improved and remixed and all that, and then they adopt the new platform in podcasting, and multiple generations now can learn from Zig. All the stuff is timeless,
exactly.
right? And all his, there's a and I mean this in the most affectionate way. There's a coriness to some of his stories that is incredibly endearing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, you know, Zig is Zig is more powerful today than probably ever before.
Yeah, and just I mean, as being a former musician and piano player, I think just the having a little bit different of the quality of the sound that goes a long way as well. It may sound old, but you just can't replace guys like him and Paul Harvey and a lot of those guys that had that distinct voice and presentation style and amazing. I mean, when you think of Automotive University, I mean, that's something we'll cite for the next 100 years. But let's jump to the CMO role today, and I'd love to know, how do you look at the modern CMO's role? I'm sure you consult to give advice to a lot of people on this, but that particular role has come under so much fire. I know a lot of the movement we're seeing today is that maybe the CMO has become obsolete, which is true for a lot of them, and now a lot of that focus has shifted more into CGO type roles, which is up for a lot of debate. Maybe it becomes more sales driven than it necessarily was a cure for where this other CMOs became obsolete. But where do you see the role today and how somebody should excel at being a good CMO, chief marketing officer today?
So I believe the CMO role has never been more exciting, never been more attractive, never been more strategic and important in the roles of companies. And so, yeah, there are other titles, CGO, whatever. That's all fine. But I if you don't have a legendary CMO today,
Yeah,
your business is.
exactly.
right? I mean, I don't know how else to put it. And the great news is, I think, oh, and I know a lot of people have negative things to say about CMOs. And look, we can talk about some of the deficiencies that are stereotypical, and some of them, um, uh, you know, maybe we earned. But listen, if you believe what I believe, which is there are three strategic components that need to come together to build a legendary business. Number one, you got to build a legendary product or service. Number two, you got to build a legendary company and business model so that you can deliver the product and service, and so that you can scale to meet the opportunity in your market category. And number three, you've got to have a legendary market category, which you then dominate. And so we think of that around here as the magic triangle, prosecuting the magic triangle: product, company, and category. So if you believe that, and we can talk about why I believe it if you like, then category design, the ability to strategically position yourself to create a unique place in the market that you can dominate, is one of the three things that matter most for the success of your business. And
Hmm.
I would go even further, Shark, and tell you that um, your category is, um, of the three, is the most strategic. No market, no company, no product, right? The category has to exist. If you want to sell Bibles, there's got to be Christians, right? And so legendary companies are on a mission to create a category which they can design and dominate over time. Now, if you don't believe anything I just said, that's okay. And good
I,
luck to you.
yeah,
But
exactly.
what I'm saying is, legendary CEOs, legendary entrepreneurs today more than ever, and the headhunters tell me this, are looking for CMOs who are true leaders, who can move not just a company but the entire
The
market
needle,
in an
right?
exponential way, and strategically design and dominate a market category. It's the number one thing people are looking for. And category creation, as my friend Eddie Yoon says, is the ultimate growth strategy. And so what I'm saying is, I think it's the most exciting time ever to be a CMO, because there is a deep appreciation that's emerged with CEOs around the value and importance of how we create and design a market category. And on top of that, we are in the digital era. We are at an inflection point in the data age that I think most people don't understand, and is incredibly powerful and exciting for entrepreneurs, for business people, for CEOs, and especially for marketers. So I put all that together and I go, yeah, I get some of the negative stuff, and we could talk about that. But candidly, I think this is the greatest time in history to be a CMO.
No, your point is correct. I don't agree that moving necessarily the CGO role and replacing mediocre marketing with too much sales focus is ever going to fix anything. But it seems like bad marketing habits extend just as easily to bad CEO habits that are making these kind of decisions based off of some kind of growth based off of bad fundamentals as a company, and then they get forced into it. So when you talk about building out a category for a company, especially an existing company. I mean, at least we know with an entrepreneur today, if they're smart and they're listening to problems that the customers have and not just pushing typical brand babble and solutions and features that they think are what's going to fix the world, which I've never agreed with either. How do you go about changing an existing company to create a more defined market category?
It's a great question. And before I answer it, just a little bit of context.
Yeah.
Um, we did a whole set of research for my first book, and we're doing a whole new set of research for my third book, which we're working on. Comes out a little bit, a few months down the line here. But um, regardless of what data we've looked at, and we've looked at it from multiple ways, but I'll give you an example from what's already published in Play Bigger. Um, Two-thirds of the economics in any tech category goes to the category queen or category king, the
Mm-hmm.
company that dominates the space. And so we analyzed every venture backed technology startup from 2000 to 2015. And we tracked the increase in value of those companies over time. And instead of asking a market share question, we asked a market cap question, which is, when you look at all the companies in any given market category, and you add up their value, that is to say, their valuation if they're private or their market cap if they're public. And then you say, okay, what are all those companies worth? And then what percentage of that number goes to the category queen? The answer is 76%.
Hmm.
And so the aha here is, whether we like it or not, in most markets and industries, we are moving to a model that says one company takes 2/3 of the economics and everybody else fights for table scraps. And so once you realize that, then the aha is, how am I going to be the company that wins? And the trap that most people and most companies fall into is they play a better strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And fundamentally, whether they want to admit it or not, their strategy is a lot like the carnival barker moron in the local car ad that we all see in our towns.
Sure.
Come on down this weekend, big sale. We got more trucks and da-da-da, we won't be undersold.
Sure.
We have the best service. All they're doing is screaming a bunch of um, uh, uh, statements that are inviting you to compare them. Some people say we will not be undersold. So companies get trapped in this mindless competition and comparison game, which ultimately leans heavy on price. Um, well, that generally is a game for losers. Legends don't do that. That's not what Sarah Blakely did with Spanx. She did not compete with pantyhose or girdles. She said she had a new invention. Everything about Spanx is, and I'm going to use this word very much on purpose, different. And so here's the aha. Legends are different, not better. Legends market things that are an exponential step forward. And as a result, they become known for a niche that they own. Do we know who the seventh greatest reggae band is? No, we have no idea, but we sure know who Bob Marley is.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we want to do is find a market category, a niche that we can be known for, such that others are compared to us. This is the big insight. Steve Jobs ignored the existence of the BlackBerry. He redesigned the way people think about a mobile phone to create a new category called a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally changed the definition of how you and I think about the problems it solves, why it's valuable, the opportunities it creates, and then, of course, what the product itself should be, right? He prosecuted the magic triangle, and so did Sarah Blakely. And so fools get caught in a better comparison game. Legends distinguish themselves by creating a new and different space, a niche, a category that they can own. And as a result, everyone who comes after them is compared to them, as opposed to them comparing themselves to others. And when the world gets you're different, the world will beat a path to your door. And when you ask the world to compare you to somebody else, you're going to be in a race to the bottom.
Well, as I was working with a company years ago, and they were running some paid search efforts for me. This was one of those types of aha moments. This is quite a few years ago, but it was something I learned early on. And if you think about it from a branded search standpoint, people waste so much of their economics falling into the trap of joining the categories with everybody else. And I would always challenge brands or challenge paid search firms in the past, if they were not going to focus just on brand, then what was their brand name term? Maybe it's an iPhone. What is the differentiator after that? And very few of the clients that I've ever worked with truly understood what that differentiator was. Maybe they knew their name, what their name meant significantly as a brand from a directional standpoint, which has high value, but they really don't understand what the differentiation of their service category, whatever that is, or their market category. And that's always been something that has frustrated me over time, watching people build out to become like everybody else. And I think one of the things I'm curious what your thoughts are. You're seeing a lot of people run, I think, at least in my opinion, towards the middle. And I want to say it was Dollar Shave Club that I saw this. And if it wasn't, I apologize. But Dollar Shave Club is calling themselves a lifestyle brand. I believe that was the category I saw that they listed themselves of. When you look at something like that, when everybody sort of rushes to create a category that maybe doesn't necessarily make sense to you, do you view them as a company like that? Would you ever look at them as a lifestyle brand, or are they simply a shaving company who's trying to create incorrectly that kind of category?
Okay, so this is an awesome example. So this is where some precision really begins to matter,
Yeah.
because people conflate brand and differentiation and category and what is a new category and what isn't. So we are now into the meat of it.
Yeah.
So number one, if Dollar Shave Club says, and I haven't read this, but if you've seen them say that what has made them successful is they're a lifestyle brand, that's what you've heard them say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If they've said that, they have no clue why they're successful. Because I'll tell you why they're successful. Are they a different product? No. They're still a blade that you and I use to shave ourselves. What made them different, and I use that word on purpose, was nothing to do with their brand. As a matter of fact, I'll say something outrageous. Your brand is only worth something if you dominate your market category. If you don't, your brand is worth shit. And I'll give you lots of examples why. But let's go back to Dollar Shave Club. There's nothing about their success that has anything to do with their quote brand being a lifestyle brand.
Exactly.
It has everything to do with they are a different service in a category that heretofore was a product category. They redesigned a new niche called shaving service. Now, they had all sorts of different value associated with that service and pricing, and there's a lot that comes into the creation of a new service. But at the fundamental level, they took a category that used to be a product category and redesigned a new niche as a service category. And then here's what they did. When most people compete inside an existing category with a better strategy, they say, our carbidingulator is faster, better, cheaper, smaller, bigger, thinner, fatter, wider, 7 blade, 6 blade, 8 blade, 12 blade, whatever, right? But it's all inside a context called a razor as a product that we consume when we buy it. They said, hey, it's a service. And there's lots of value to having it be a service. The right amount shows up once a month or whatever it was. And because you're signing up for a year, we can give it to you cheaper or whatever the hell they said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here's why a category design strategy works to create, in this case, a new company and a new brand. Because when you do what they did, they forced not a comparison, which is what happens in a better conversation. They forced a choice. That's what legendary category designers do. They force choice, not comparison. So if I say to you, hey, Shark, you feel like a thin crust or deep dish pizza tonight? Oh, that's a comparison. I like thin crust better. I like deep dish better, whatever. If I say to you, hey, do you feel like pizza or do you feel like Chinese? That's a choice. And so what Dollar Shave Club did was they said, do you want to go to the pharmacy and go through all the hee-haw of buying razors? Or do you want them to show up on your door and have be super convenient and awesome? And they changed the design of how a market works. And as a result, because they did that, they built a legendary brand. But their brand is only valuable because they dominate the category. And you see brands who are highly valuable, who dominate categories, who exit their categories and do suicide missions and fail and are
Exactly.
confused, right? Red Bull recently exited the quote energy shot market category because they put out a competitor to 5 Hour Energy and got nowhere. And they got confused that because they had a powerful brand, they could enter a new category and beat a category king. When in point of fact, they don't understand that their brand is only valuable inside their category. Google got crushed by Facebook with Google Plus, even though brand strategists would tell you the Google brand is worth more than the Facebook brand. What they don't tell you is it's only valuable inside the market categories it dominates. And so the aha here is the category makes the brand, not the other way around. It's the niche that makes you known. You don't become known for nothing, you become known for something. And that something is you're number one in a given market category or niche. The category makes the brand, not the other way around.
Well, and I apologize to Dollar Shave Club if I've totally flubbed that up, but I feel like I read that somewhere or is an article written about them. But I see that happening not just with. I mean, there's tons of examples out there where people are trying to rush to run the wrong direction when trying to differentiate themselves per the way you just very eloquently described it. So, is there a time when you find businesses become too niched? I think a lot of times it often comes down to money. Maybe they start out with, other than bad marketing if they do that wrong, but they may start out with one product or service line and be a decent company, and maybe growth stagnates, and then they start going into cookie cutter mode that's just horrible and sinks the ship, and then it's doing what everybody else is doing. And I find a lot of times that they fall into that trap and then don't refine their niche. How do you sort of keep a company from being too niched, or is too niched ever a problem if you're trying to solve one specific problem?
So I think in the beginning, and I think this is true for a new startup, and I also
Yeah.
think it's true for a Fortune 500 company that's launching into a new market category opportunity. Um, Generally speaking, the more niche down you are, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a weird irony that happens over time, which is, if you'll allow me the jargon, you got to niche down to play bigger. So you dominate a small niche,
Exactly.
and then if you're smart, you begin to expand out. The greatest example, of course, in modern history, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is Jeff Bezos and Amazon.com, right? It starts with books, right? But we all know what happens over time. The other thing most people don't realize is that Amazon AWS, Amazon Web Services, is the fastest growing large scale B2B enterprise technology company of the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
It's virtually unprecedented that a company that's roughly $40 billion is growing at, you know, 40% or something along, somewhere around those numbers, 30 to 40%. It's insanity. And so my point is, they've created the greatest e-commerce company and the greatest B2B enterprise company at the same time. So they're the ultimate example. I can give you maybe a mid-sized company, a large mid-sized company example. That's one that is equally impressive, just on a different scale, if you like.
Yeah, please.
So the folks at Taser created this new category of a non-lethal self-defense weapon
Mm-hmm.
for law enforcement, and of course, have branched into the consumer market over time. And their mission was a bulletless gun, a gun that would allow somebody to defend themselves but not be lethal to the person they're defending themselves against. Okay, great. So um, they build the Taser category. They become the leader in these bulletless guns, these electronic devices, right? Taser becomes the number one brand in the category by far.
Mm-hmm.
But then what do? After they've niched down, I would describe that as a fairly tight niche to get started in. They
Right.
begin to think about adjacencies. So where do they move next? Body cameras. Now, why do they move to body cameras? They say, well, if we expand the definition of our mission and therefore category, we want to be a company now that represents, safety in self-defense for law enforcement. Okay, great. So now body cameras. Well, then guess what happens? Um, they see an opportunity because body cameras create massive demand for storage. So they become a cloud storage services company. And so now they've created, you could either call them three connected niches, or now they've morphed together into what you could think of as a suite of law enforcement products and services that come together um, in a suite to provide a set of capabilities for keeping law enforcement safe, but allowing them to get their job done, right? And that is a combination of non-lethal guns, cameras to be able to record exactly what happened, and then a cloud file storage service to be able to keep those files and search them rapidly and easily for playback purposes in trials and so forth. And so that's a great example of, they start with a super tight niche and they begin to do what legends do, which is they stay focused on the problem, not the solution. They keep asking themselves, what can we do to make a difference for law enforcement next? How do these products that we're creating, these services that we're creating, connect? And they continuously expand the niche wider and wider. So they niche down in the beginning, they gain the category queen, category king position, and then they do what all legends do, which is they begin to expand out from there, looking at other adjacent problems that they, because of their unique category position, are enabled to solve. And whether it's Amazon at the largest scale in the modern era, or whether it's a mid-sized company like the company's now called Axon, any company can do this if they start by dominating a niche that matters, become known for a niche that they can own, and then think strategically about how they're going to redesign the category around a set of adjacent problems and therefore solutions that are going to make a difference to a customer.
So, you've got a lot of strong opinions, and I'm sure that those have been that way I'm sure your opinions have evolved, but you sound like somebody that's always had strong opinions. And I'm curious about this as somebody who also has probably been a bull in a china shop or a shark in a china shop way too often. But I think a lot about corporate America, and to me, it's somewhat a bit of the Scorpion the Frog fable. You got a lot of junior people that come in with big ideas, and they fall into the trap of listening to a lot of the C-level folks who are typically locked into bad historical habits. When you look at your path up into the business world, and you look at how you were trying to get people to think the way you were thinking, to move into, to differentiate the companies that you worked with, and for to create a market category. How did you go about creating and implementing this change within people? Because you can't be one man on an island trying to scream this and it make perfect sense to the world if they would just listen. But getting people to listen and then act upon it, unless you're at a C-suite role, it's hard for people to do.
Even in a C-suite role,
Oh
I
yeah,
would tell you,
you got your board of directors and investors behind that.
yeah. And so, I've been doing this for the better part of 30 years, Shark. And I would say until my first book came out, my batting average was probably 200,
Yeah,
2 out of 10. And even then, it might have been less than 200. And I'm not talking about people I had a discussion with this about. I'm talking about people who sat through a day
yeah,
long workshop and started to pay a lot of money. I'm talking about people who invested millions of dollars and then within 6 to 9 months threw the whole thing out. Like I'm talking about people who raised hundreds of millions of dollars in IPOs, and within less than a year of the IPO, where they said that the category design was a major factor in the money they raised, in less than 12 months, throw it out.
yeah,
So like, this did not stick very well
yeah,
for a long time, because look, here's what we get trained. We get trained the best product wins. There's virtually no entrepreneur that isn't absolutely in a love affair with their product or service.
Sure.
And in the technology industry, it's even worse. We get trained the greatest algorithm wins, right? And so it's all about the product, more product. And then we get trained that what you need is a great sales force, great product. And all the sales force needs to do is show people that product, and this is all going to work. And people believe in that strategy like they believe in the availability of oxygen.
Agreed. Yeah.
And look, it works every once in a while, but the reality is that's not what Henry Ford did. He did not leave his market category up to chance. You have to teach people how to think about a problem or an opportunity in a new and different and exciting way. And when they accept your design, your definition, your point of view, then they stop doing what they used to do, horse and buggy, and start doing a new thing, horseless carriage. Oh, and by the way, you got to convince the government to build a whole new a whole new platform called roads and highways to make your innovation go, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's exponential change. And those are the people who move things forward. And so the legends don't leave their product or service up to chance. They proactively, via provocative, engaging point of view, teach people how to think in exactly the way they want them to. And when that happens, people camp overnight at your store to get your new iPhone.
So after the book, what's your batting average?
My batting average today is 1,000%.
Yeah.
Well, and it's for two reasons, to be completely candid. One, the book has helped massively because when an executive team that's thoughtful sits down and reads it, it's 270 pages. You can bang it out quickly. They tend to get it. If you don't get it after that, nothing's going to help you. You're just going to believe forever the best product wins, and God bless you. Um, so that's been the primary change. And the other one, candidly, is I do very little advising and consulting anymore. And so the bar that the bar that needs to get cleared for me to get involved with a company today is 10x what it ever was. Because I just, first of all, I'm primarily focused on podcasting and writing because those are ways to make a difference that scale. And
Agreed.
secondarily, I'm not around, and I'm not working with anybody who is around. And so if you're not super serious about designing and dominating a giant category that matters and you don't have the balls, brains, and bucks to do it, I'm not coming.
Well, one thing that's driven me nuts as I've gotten back into speaking again is I've got to compete with a lot of people who are, just either aren't knowledgeable in the business world in marketing and business in general, haven't either lost their hair or have enough gray hairs to see what is really working other than just what they've read on Google and then go out there and preach. So it's just being whether it's you as a business coach or as a speaker, podcaster, author, whatever, it really does help to have that niche to build out. Now, for me, as I said earlier, it's a little more shark diving and marketing, but I'm doing a really niche down area, if you will, for me.
Yeah, and I think it's really the only strategy that works. My friend Matt Johnson has a great new podcast out called Micro Famous,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the beauties of niching down in the technology environment we have today is a micro niche that would have been hard to be successful in, for example, for geography reasons. Now geography doesn't matter. And so one of my favorite micro famous niche down superstars, my wife and I have 8 hens, chickens, and we adore them. And keeping chickens as pets has become somewhat of a phenomenon now. And as a result, the gal who's the category queen of thought leaders and experts in that world is a Facebook micro famous celebrity. And I don't even know her real name. She goes by the chicken chick.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep chickens as pets, there's an 80% chance you know who she is. You follow her blog, you see her videos, and you follow her on Facebook. And so the technology allows us to have micro niches with macro scale, if you will.
So, do you ever eat the chickens, or ever eat chicken in general? Not your chickens, but or did you
I
become
can't
vegan
do
once
it.
you moved to California?
No, I was vegetarian for several years, and it just didn't really work for me.
Yeah,
And I mean, I gave it a go. I mean, I was a vegetarian for years, but it was not. I couldn't get my body to respond. And I did used to eat chicken, and I just can't now. It'd be like eating dog or cat.
exactly. Yeah.
And look, I know it makes me hypocritical because I eat other animals, and other animals are wonderful too. So I'm not trying to be a hypocrite about it, but um, I just can't. And and the other thing about chickens, and of course there are other animals who are severely abused as well, but most experts will tell you there is no creature on planet Earth that suffers at the level that
Oh God, yeah.
that poultry suffers. So there's another aspect of that, but mostly it's just because I know how awesome they are and how funny they are and how fun they are, and so I can't bring myself to do it.
Well, that's a perfect transition from you not eating chicken to me not eating shark because I'm a big, massive shark advocate and somebody wants to help see that population flourish. What kind of advice do you give teams, C-level execs, entrepreneurs, managers into hiring legendary marketers? I mean, what do you tell them to look for when building their teams? Because it's hard to find the right traits coming in, and it's hard to build them and hard to keep them as well.
So as I said, I think the number one skill today in marketing is how do I design a category which we can then dominate and take
Mm-hmm.
2/3 of the economics. And so I personally, in the handful of companies I look for or work with, I look for marketers, CMOs who have a track record in that and who understand that. So I think that's really important. Um, the second thing I would say to you is I think today more than ever, what's required to do legendary work is a diversity of thinking.
Yes, thank you.
And I think thinking about thinking is the most important thinking we can do. And we recently, by way of example, had this awesome guy on who grew up in Silicon Valley as a product marketer and product manager named Buster Benson. And he's got a new book coming out called Why Are We Yelling? And he looks at cognitive bias, and he looks at sort of unpacking arguments and why we have the biases we have, and so forth and so on. And so my point is, I think if you're going to consider anything strategic, and I think the question called how do we build a enduring value company that has designed and dominated a giant a market category that matters, I think that's something that requires some thinking. And so I think a diversity of thinking, and I think being able to engage in meaningful conversation where one is willing to be wrong, where one cares more about the outcome than one's personal looking good.
Yeah,
A conversation for me with really smart, really committed people who care about the outcome more than anything else and are all come to it understanding we bring different perspectives and we all have different blind spots. That's incredibly powerful. And I'm not just talking about a ethnic diversity or male female diversity.
exactly.
I'm talking about age diversity. I'm talking about skill set diversities, et cetera. And so I think when a small to medium sized group of legendary people with a diverse set of backgrounds and skill sets come together to really try to get after how are we going to do marketing that is exponential, that moves the world from the way it is to the way we want it to be, that strategically positions us as dominating a giant category that matters. And as a result, we deliver enduring value to our community, to our world, to our people, and to our shareholders. I think that requires a diversity of thinking and an openness of thought. And so I think that's the first one. The second one is, you know, there comes a time for thinking and then there comes a time for
Yeah,
action. And it takes courage to be legendary. Exponential marketing, radical marketing that designs and dominates new categories. You get to a place where you can't research it anymore. You can't research a big idea. Focus groups are largely not helpful. And so it takes the courage of a committed executive and leadership team to say, we are going to go for this because we've done our homework, we've made our decisions, and we believe in this. And my buddy Eddie Yoon talks about the distinction between missionaries and mercenaries. Are we going to have the courage to go on a mission that matters and really do something legendary here? And so I think the courage, it takes courage to be legendary. So I think a diversity of thinking and the courage to be legendary and take aggressive and thoughtful action to produce the intended results that we aim for, which is becoming the category queen or king in a category that matters. I think that's the next, big piece of it. And then the third piece of it, I think, regardless of what industry you're in, you have to have a level of technology savvy today. You have to understand what machine learning is. You have to understand what the Internet of Things is. You have to understand all the new digital platforms that are available to us. You have to understand in marketing, by way of example, that owned media is at a point where where it's eclipsing the value of earned media. Right? What am I saying? We used to go after PR, by way of example. PR still matters, but guess what? You can create your own media company inside your
Exactly.
business, right? And so, look, this is going to sound boastful, but I'll just say it. You're talking to a guy with a very small team and a relatively very small budget that's created two top 200 Apple podcast charting podcasts in the face of government funded NPR, in
Mm-hmm.
the face of the Wall Street Journal, in the face of Fox, in the face of Wondery and these other purpose built podcast media companies. We are competing with some of the biggest budget media companies in the United States of America. And a very small group of people with a very small budget in comparison has broken to the top 200 out of 750,000 podcasts. And so my point is, there are new pathways that we have to think about. There are new platforms, and so understanding the new technology, understanding digital transformation, understanding the cloud and how that intersects with social, mobile, IoT, machine learning. There's a whole set of new startups that are impacting the way we do marketing, where the white space in the market could be to do growth hacking. I think growth hacking is one of the most exciting things we've seen in the history of marketing. So my point in all of that is the other component of this is, you will either embrace the new technology and use it to strategic advantage or get run over by it. And so I think the CMO today has to be as technologically savvy as any other executive.
I mean, I could just, that could be the entire podcast right there for a question that was just asked on the fly. It's something I ran about on pretty much every other podcast, but I get so frustrated by this culture that so many agencies and marketing teams have within brands, where they're so focused on culture with finding like-minded people who are afraid to offend each other. And I say offend in not saying something crude that should be considered offensive, but really also just a difference of opinion, and or people are going to be scared about thinking differently, and it drives me absolutely insane. You live off the coast of Santa Cruz, I believe, where it's absolutely
That's right.
beautiful this time of year. What is your favorite kind of shark and why? It's a question that I have niched into every conversation on here.
Huh, that's a great
It's a
question.
lot of big, beautiful great whites off your coast.
Yeah, we're not happy to see them.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't begrudge them their existence, but they're much less of a risk than most people would tell you.
100%.
Um, but I don't know. I you know what? I guess I've always been partial to the whale shark, um, because you can go diving with one, and that's on my
100%.
bucket list. I haven't done it yet, and they're these big, gentle giants. And every video or photo I've ever seen of people diving with whale sharks, it just looks extraordinary. And as a diver and a surfer and an animal lover, I can't wait to get down to Cabo and go dive with the whale shark. So I guess I'll go with the whale shark.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I just saw three of them less than a month ago. But I mean, they're absolutely beautiful creatures. I mean, the biggest fish in the sea, about half the size of a blue whale, but still just absolutely gorgeous compared to other fish and just so docile. I mean, they're so large, but they have the esophagus the size of a quarter, and people are afraid they're going to get swallowed by something that can barely handle krill when it comes in. But Ocean Ramsey is somebody I'd always recommend that people follow her and her conservationism. She just wrote a book about how sharks are misunderstood, and she dives often with great whites and whale sharks. But
Very cool.
Christopher, it's that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
I sure hope so.
All right, here we go. You've been described, number one is you've been described as the Godfather of Category Design. I love that title. So I have to ask at least one Godfather question. But Godfather 1 or Godfather 2?
So tough. Um, I don't, I don't know that I have a preference. I think most people would say Godfather 2. Um, but the party doesn't get started without Godfather 1. So I
Exactly.
think maybe you got to go with Godfather 1, even though I think a lot of supposed experts will tell you 2 is the better movie. But what do I know? They're both great. And I've watched both of them many times. They're a great way to knock out an international flight.
Oh, yeah. You know what's sad is just how many generations are not watching those movies, and now all the mafia movies are horrible, but it's another story. Number two, we talked about where you originally from and where you live in the general area today and batting averages. So I got to ask, Toronto Blue Jays or San Francisco Giants?
Actually, the answer for me is Montreal Expos.
You became an Expos fan even though you're from Toronto?
No, I originally born and raised in Montreal, and then I had moved to
Well, then
Toronto.
I screwed that question
So
up. I just remember you saying Toronto. So,
yeah, no, fair enough. And listen, I was living in Toronto when Joe Carter hit the home
yeah,
run to win the World Series, and so I have very positive and wonderful memories of the Blue Jays. But no, you're talking to a kid who used to cut class and go get $1 bleacher seats with his
good
buddies,
for you.
at the expos, and those late '70s and early to mid '80s expos teams those are all my heroes.
Well, number three, being a CEO, which you've been a couple times now, and or being a CMO.
Um, I think the real answer for me is it's all about how legendary the team is, and my role is less important. And so it's how legendary the market opportunity and category is, and how legendary the team and the technology is. And if it's a legendary team with a legendary category opportunity, then like today, I don't have any roles at all that are an operating role or any roles with any direct responsibility. Um, the roles that I'm in today are our collaboration
Yeah,
roles and coaching and hopefully teaching type roles. And so, I just want to be in a position to make a difference for a company that has an opportunity to do something exponential.
great point. Number four, the Lochhead on Marketing podcast or Legends and Losers podcast.
Well, now you're asking me to pick between
Sophie's
two
choice.
children.
Yep.
Um, so we rebranded Legends and Losers a little while ago. It's today called Follow Your Different.
Yeah.
Um, wow, I don't know. Uh, I guess I'd have to go to Follow Your Different, and the only reason is maybe a little bit of a selfish one. Um, the marketing podcast is really bringing to life um, a set of strategies and mindsets over time, and so it's sort of like it's a way for me to contribute a set of learnings and hopefully shine a light on a set of ideas and people who make a giant difference in the marketing world. But that's been a world that I've lived in for over 30 years and I know well. And so I personally tend to learn more um, by having the authors and business leaders and incredible athletes like Bill Walton or, four-star General McChrystal or these incredible people who were lucky enough to get on Follow Your Different. And so I probably learn more about new things on a selfish level from Follow Your Different because it's much more wide ranging as opposed to Lock It On Marketing, which is, as the name would suggest, pretty focused on marketing and in category design.
Yeah, and I run through the same thing. I tend to think, would I rather be a subject matter expert or subject matter learner? And I get a lot more fun out of learning and realizing there's always something new to learn. So I appreciate that viewpoint. And I think I was old school because I have had it set on auto dial for a while with Legends and Losers, and then just didn't even pay attention to the name change from listening to Follow Your Difference. I just
Fair
knew it was you. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, the real niche differentiator question is biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread.
Good man. Christopher, where can people find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing, follow your thought leadership, really, and get a copy of this great book, Niche Down? I mean, where do you point them to? Is it Amazon, or do you have a site that you want them to go to today?
Yeah, all of my stuff hangs off of lochhead.com, and it's 2 H's, no K, LOCHHEAD.com. All the books are there. The podcasts are there. Awesome blogs, and, hopefully a bunch of other fun stuff.
Awesome. Christopher, thank you so much for being on A Shark's Perspective today.
Thank you, Shark. I appreciate you having me. Very kind of you.
So there was my conversation with Christopher Lochhead, a former 3-time public company CMO, a podcaster with 2 of the top business podcasts on Apple, the best-selling author of Niche Down, How to Become Legendary by Being Different, and he's been referred to as the Godfather of Category Design. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, his research reflects that over time, the top companies in their market category earn the top 76% of the revenue market cap in that category. Really an interesting take. And as Christopher said, and I quote, "The aha here is, whether we like it or not, most markets and industries, we are moving to a model that says one company takes 2/3 of the economics and everyone else is fighting for table scraps." And so once you realize that, then the aha is, how am I going to be the company that wins? And the trap that most people in most companies fall into is they play a better strategy. So true. And I love the TV ad comparison where the barker always screams about having the best deals. A lot of companies, especially those in the rear view mirrors of leaders, get trapped in that mindless competition and comparison game. And as he said, legends don't do that. They're different, not better. And I quote, "Legends market things that are an exponential step forward, and as a result, they become known for a niche that they own. Others should be compared to you, not the other way around." Also, legends distinguish themselves by creating a new and different space, a niche, a category that they can own, and as a result, everyone else who comes after them is compared to them as opposed to them comparing themselves to others. And I'm ready to yell bingo here. So whatever you do, create your unique category and don't be in a race to the bottom. Second, I used the shaving brand as an example where they were calling themselves a lifestyle brand rather than just, to me, shaving supplies I could get at any other store. And he brought up how people conflate brand and differentiation differently. When most people compete in a space with a new niche, they force a choice. Legendary category designers force a choice, not a comparison. The niche is what makes you known, as in being known as number one in a category and not the other way around. So dominate your niche, and then you can build out and pivot around it. Third, you've heard me talk on quite a few episodes about diversity, and I don't mean in the traditional HR sense. My intent with this often is to say that diversity breeds so much better thinking. We've gotten so cultured, if you will, into similar thoughts, and too many are following like sheep. It's okay to bring in different kinds of people who think differently to help you grow, and it's honestly needed to grow and survive. Christopher eloquently says, "I think today more than ever, what's required to do legendary work is a diversity of thinking. And I think thinking about thinking is the most important thinking you can do." And I couldn't agree more. Yes, you can succeed to some degree if everyone is so PC and Stepford in their approach to thinking. But who wants that? You'll grow bigger and faster and better, but oftentimes breaking a few eggs. Seek to be legendary and diversify your thinking. Think in a different way to move things forward. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Today, I'm going to ask you to be the category leader shark that you can be, whether it's being the legendary shark like a great white or a tiger, or even a niche shark like a hammerhead or a wobbegong. Just be the most amazing shark you can be. Keep swimming and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.